Hello, everybody, and welcome to What the Heck Does That Precon Do? Yes, this is another variation of our What the Heck series because Chris and I can't stop thinking of more variations of things to do, so we're just going to keep doing it. My name's Josh. I'm one of your hosts for this evening. I've already mentioned Chris. Chris, introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Chris. I use they, them pronouns, and I can't stick to one format point.
Yes, this just explains both of us to a T and why we get along so well, because we're both scatterbrained. We just need Tom in this mix, and we would never get any sort of conversation finished or any episode finished.
I think if we didn't make some effort to plan these episodes out a little bit, it would just ramble on for 3 hours every time, which would be unlistenable to. Although Sheevan and Wheeler manage it, so I'm just saying, like, it's possible.
Yes. So the reason why this one is called What the Heck Does That Precon Do is because recently, the past couple of weeks, the Precon lists have come out for Lorwyn Eclisped. So we are going to be talking about those. We're going to be talking about one of those Precons now.
And the other one next week.
And the other one next week, yes. This one that we are going to be talking about today is Dance of the Elements, which is helmed by Aisling the Limitless. The backup commander for it is Massive Mysteries, which is funky artwork. I can see that. I could honestly, now, as you can probably see from the overlay and from our cameras and stuff, Chris has got a lot of tattoos. I also have some tattoos, but Chris has a lot that are more D&D themed.
That's true.
Yeah. This Massive Mysteries that's on screen now, I could see that being a tattoo on you.
It has got my palette as well. I like to go with, as you can probably see, most of my tattoos are quite colourful. I tend to go for more coloured than monochrome. So yeah, I can see it. Yeah, except the only issue with this is that it's such a... I wonder if it had a different name, and they went mass. There were all sorts of names it could be, but that's just a map. That's a mass of body parts. That's not even close to being a thing.
But yeah, anyway, so I'll just go over what the commanders do for anybody who may not have seen the reveals that happened over the past couple of weeks. Aisling the Limitless is a red and 2 elemental sorcerer for a 2/3. Elemental spells you cast from your hand have Evoke 4. Now, Evoke is if you cast a spell for its Evoke cost, it's sacrificed when it enters, which seems really bad. Then we get to the second part of the effect. Whenever you sacrifice a non-token elemental, create a token that's a copy of it. The token gains haste until end of turn. At the beginning of your next end step, sacrifice it unless you pay all 5 colours or Wooburg.
Yeah. Sorry, say what the mass does as well. Let's just do them both in one.
Okay, yeah. So Massive Mysteries costs all 5 colours to cast. It's just an elemental. It's a 5/5. It has First Strike, Vigilance, and Trample. At the beginning of combat on your turn, another target elemental you control gains Myriad until end of turn. For anybody who doesn't know what Myriad is, whenever it attacks, for each opponent other than defending player, you may create a token copy that's tapped and attacking that player or a planeswalker they control. Exile the token at the end of combat.
Right. Start off with some very basic points here. Number one, this is not simple. That's fine. It's fine to make complicated precons. It's all 5 colours, and the commander's only 1 colour, but she has a 5-colour activated ability, which makes her a 5-coloured commander. Just to clear up any conversations there about what colour is this deck actually. Also, fundamentally, Evoke was designed originally for original Lorwyn. I think it was original Lorwyn. I'm pretty sure it was original Lorwyn. It was designed to be a way to make creatures work as spells. So the idea was that the evoke cost of a creature meant that you cast it, it got sacrificed immediately, and thus you were effectively casting a spell that also had a creature type. And it sort of worked, but what people realized very quickly is it was a very way to trigger all the sacrifice effects. And lots of decks have good sacrifice effects, so Evoke became a sacrifice deck mainstay and led to some of the more popular elementals becoming very much more useful outside of like elemental tribe and elemental kindred decks. So that's why Muldrifter, for example, which is in this deck, which I'll just read out what Muldrifter does. It's a good classic card. 4 and a blue for an elemental. It's a flying 2/2. And when this creature enters, draw 2 cards, but it can be evoked for 2 and a blue.
So yeah, you would have no reason to evoke this for unless you wanted to get copies of it with Aisling.
Well, that's the thing. In most decks, what it's played for is a 3-cost draw 2 cards. which is fine. It's a decent rate of return. It triggers all the enters, triggers all the leaves, triggers. It's all good stuff anyway. And if you happen to have 5 mana, you'll get a 2/2 flying body, nothing to sniff at. So it has good reason to exist. In this deck, what would happen is you would cast the Muldrifter if your commander's out. You'd cast the Muldrifter. You could evoke it with Ashling for 4 generic mana, or for 2 and a blue, you can evoke it as is, and then you'll get a flying 2/2 copy you can attack with this turn as well. That's the basic gist of it. That's how Ashling works. That's the principle of Ashling.
Actually, saying that, just sorry to interrupt you there, but just reading Ashling's effect again, it says whenever you sacrifice a non-token elemental, it doesn't say whenever you sacrifice it to her own evoke cost.
No,
so if you play Muldrifter for it, sorry, it's just that just clicked in my brain. Okay, that's quite cool. Anyway, carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, it means if you evoke elementals for their own evoke cost, it still works. Ashling still works on the board to trigger cheaper elementals, which is relevant because Ashling costs 2 and a red. Her evoke trick costs 4. And then you can spend 5, 1 of each color, to keep the token copy. I'm pretty much going to assume that you are never going to do that. Because even if you've cast Ashling, and now it's your next turn, and she's survived a round on the board, good luck with that, by the way, you need 4 generic mana, and then another 5 on top of that. So you need 9 mana floating to make a token copy of an elemental that you've just evoked to keep it, which will be more expensive and more color, because you've got to have 1 of each color, more color difficult than just playing the damn thing in the first place and not evoking it. So this feels like the 5 colors is a bit of a trap. We'll come back to that later. This was Josh's idea at first when we were talking about it. But I think it's worth mentioning early that the whole 5-colorness of this deck is actually very different from your standard 5-color deck. Like, I run 3 5-color decks. 4? 3. I run 3 5-color decks. One of which is a Sagas deck, as Tom Bombadil. It runs all 5 colors, and it runs Sagas in all 5 colors. And the commander costs all 5 colors. One is Omnath, the 5-color Omnath, which is 5 colors, but one of the pips is a black Phyrexian mana, so I can spend life to cast it. And the other one is the Otogatog, which is a 5-color one, is all changelings. All of those decks, a lot of the thinking about the design of the deck for me went into how do I make sure I get as many colors of mana as possible as quickly as possible, because I want to cast my commander. And that's quite relevant in most 5-color decks. In this one, it's not so much. In this one, actually, you only need the initial red mana to get Ashling out, and then you need generic mana to cast elementals from your hand. The problem is that only works if Ashling's on the board.
Yes.
And I think that has to be our first point about this Precon design, which I'm afraid is going to be a little bit negative, because they've got this amazing commander that comes out for 3 mana, and when she comes down, she has an amazing activated ability that you cast like 8 drops, 10 drops, whatever, for 4 generic mana. She is going to get removed. I'm not saying she's immediately kill on sight, because we haven't really played with her yet, and most people haven't yet. I imagine she will become kill on sight very quickly.
There was a joke that was made.
Sorry,
there was a joke that was made by, I think it was Jarvis, on the reveal trailer for these precons and stuff, where Jarvis went, "This has got a really good curve. You cast your commander on turn 3, you evoke on turn 4, you cast your commander on turn 5."
Yeah.
Recast your commander on turn 5.
Well, yeah, exactly. Because what's going to happen is you're going to play this 3-color thing. If people haven't played against it before, they'll go, okay, your commander's out on turn 3, whatever. And then on turn 4, you go, cool, I'm going to evoke this. And the deck is full of them. I'm going to evoke this 8 cost for 4. It comes in, I get its enters trigger. It dies. I get a token copy of it that I can attack you with this turn because it has haste. And I get its enters trigger again. And if it had a leaves trigger, I get one of those as well. That is so much value immediately. And there are some crazy elementals in this deck that have crazy abilities. Like, just an example, it's the worst one I can find in the deck. Worst is in best.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a Horde of Notions in your hand, and you play Ashling, and spend 4 generic mana to evoke your Horde of Notions, It doesn't have Endless triggers. It doesn't have Leaves triggers. What it does have is a 5-cost activated ability that you can activate immediately if you have a way of cheating the mana to play target elemental card from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. And you can activate that on the stack before it goes away. So if you happen to have the many ways this deck has of making 5 Wooburg color mana, because it's got like Timeless Lotuses and stuff like that in it, there's no reason you couldn't cheat out like 2 or 3 big elementals from your graveyard for very, very simple. I think you play against this once and you go, cool, the minute she hits the battlefield, she's dead. Or before she activate the ability, she's dead. She has to be, because otherwise you're going to lose very quickly. And then they've got this whole deck of full of cool elementals and not a single piece of protection for Ashley. Not one. There's nothing in the deck that says hexproof. Nothing in the deck that says shroud. Nothing.
There was one thing that I was looking at when I was looking through the deck and stuff. I was like, what would be and looking through like how I would do the land base and all that sort of stuff. Sure. And I was like, well, this is a 5-color deck, but when I'm looking at what type of cards I want to have in this deck, for me, it's actually primarily a 4-color deck. And then there's 1 color that sort of gets left to the side because the other 4 colors all do something that I want for this deck to function. And unfortunately, Chris, the color type that is sort of put to the wayside and is more so in the creatures than anything else is blue. The other 4 colors, what are more important, what I consider to be more important in this deck: red, primarily because Aisling is red to cast. That's it. Green for ramp. White for protection for Aisling, and then black for and white as well, I suppose. No, black would be for the types of cards that Chris and I both like, where we protect the commander by bringing them back when they die. Those types of effects. And blue, I know you could say, oh, what about counter spells and all of that sort of stuff? And yes, you could add counter spells into it if you wanted to do that, but that's not my play style. So blue, when it comes to 5-color decks, mainly blue sort of sits on the wayside unless the commander has blue in their pip.
I think counter spells is actually the wrong choice, and I think blue's the wrong choice. Blue is traditionally the color that gives the hexproofs and the things like that. I agree, and this is a 5-color deck, so you could do that if you wanted to, but our black cheek death spells we talk about all the time and really, really like are friggin' killer in this deck. They're insane because all they say is once you cast it on a creature, that creature, when it dies, returns to the battlefield. So you can use it at instant speed to save Aisling from a kill spell. You can use it to cast on the elemental that you evoked. So you evoke it at instant speed. You give it, I don't know, Unholy Aura. Like there's hundreds of these cheat death spells, and we've talked about them.
Undying Malice, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, there's so many. Persist is in the other deck, but like there's many cards that do this trick. And if you do this trick, if you cast your elemental at instant speed, holding priority, you cast the instant speed thing on it, you can do that before it dies. In other words, it dies, it comes back, it still dies, you still get the token copy with haste that goes at the end, but you still got the body on the field as well. Yeah. So if you don't need it to protect Aisling, you're also suddenly, like every elemental becomes a double whammy. And that's very, very cool. Also, Aisling says, I'm trying to get this right, if you evoke for 4, the whole elemental coming back in and recurring thing happens. If Aisling dies at instant speed, an instant speed spell that says she comes back from death after when she dies, she comes back battlefield, that happens at instant speed. So if you can do it all at instant speed with the right timing, you can probably still get the Aisling trigger off and still get everything you want to do going, even though someone tried to remove her. There are also black spells like this that avoid exile effects.
I would probably disagree with that because the copy of Aisling that comes back in is a new copy because she still hits the graveyard.
You'd have to you'd have to evoke it again.
Yeah,
you'd have to evoke it again. You'd lose the 4 generic mana from casting that, but generic mana is very easy to come by. Not worried about that.
Yeah.
The thing that's more interesting is that black recursion will not stop this, because putting her in the command zone and recasting her for 3 mana is totally fine. But if you can do it all at instant speed on your turn or on someone else's turn if they use the removal on their turn, which they might do if they've got like edicts and stuff like that, means that you can keep your strategy going relatively easily by just having lots and lots of black recursions sat in your hand waiting people to take rid of your commander, because they're going to try, and they have to try, and it makes perfect sense to do that. There's also cheat death spells like Kaya's Ghost Form that cheat exile. So if they start using swords and that sort of thing, don't matter, you can stop it from happening. I think that might be the biggest thing that I was expecting to see in this deck and isn't there, and it strikes me as weird that it's not there. Also, like, Swiftfoot Boots are like, what, £1.25? I don't love having generically good cards like Swiftfoot Boots, but it's a precon. Come on. Even Lightning Greaves are not that expensive, and it's a precon. It'd be so easy to drop them in.
They're normally in precons, even if the precon isn't a sort of doesn't focus on equipments and stuff, they're normally still there.
It's also, it's doubly irritating because they do have some graveyard recursion in there, normally on big elemental bodies, which makes sense. But Ashling's effect doesn't work with Muldrotha that's in the deck. Because Muldrotha says you have to cast it. You can cast a spell. Like, yes, you can cast an elemental from your graveyard using Ashling's evoke ability. That works. What you can't
Ashling's ability specifically says when you cast it, you can cast it for your hand for the evoke
cost.
That
doesn't work. Why is it in the deck if that doesn't work? The whole trigger and trick of what you are doing then doesn't make any sense. And I mean, there's one. Horde of Notions lets you recur elementals from your graveyard for 5 mana without paying their mana cost. In other words, you can't evoke them. So the same thing, it just doesn't work. It feels a bit like, and this is very harsh towards Watsy's designers, I don't mean to be cruel, but it feels a bit like my first Elemental deck. Ooh, there's all these elementals. Ooh,
it does feel very beginnery. Yes, now that you say that,
it's like, oh, there's cool elementals that do these crazy things. Yes, there are. They don't work with the commander, but they're big cool elementals, though. Sure, there's a single black pip card called Raise Dead. Play that. You get the elemental out of your graveyard, put it in your hand, and then you evoke it for 4. It's not in the deck, and it's right there, and it costs like, what, a 10p card? And it's perfect for this, and they haven't put it in. I genuinely don't understand why they've done that.
There's also lots of different ways that you could go. Lots of different ways that you can go with this deck. Lots and lots of different ways. So, recursion style effect that you would normally find in, say, Mardu or Aristocrats with Orzhov and all of that sort of stuff. I think what this deck, looking at the creatures that are in this deck and the other cards that are in this deck, the land base, that's a mess on its own. But looking at everything else, this is one of those decks, like Chris just said, it's like my first elemental deck. This can go in so many different ways because it's 5 colors, and I think it unlocks the ability for you to do things like Aristocrats in 5 colors, where there might not necessarily be commanders that allow you to do that in 5 colors that aren't generic Orophon or Kenrith or something. ETB. I don't think, is there an ETB commander in 5 colors?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, but probably.
Probably, yeah.
Also, like, a Blood Artist costs nothing, is 1 and a black, and every time you trigger her evoke effect, you deal damage to everybody.
Yeah.
This stuff is not difficult.
One of the things that's sort of going around now is there's so many cards that have Blood Artist's effect now that you could just have all of those in the deck.
I'm currently building a deck where I need a couple of Blood Artist effects. Oh my god, there's so many. There's hundreds of the damn things. And there's not one in this deck. I mean, there's no elemental version, but also that could be one of the new cards. And instead, like, there's some really cool new cards. Don't get me wrong, there's some awesome ones, but they don't feel particularly germane. Like, there's 2 big elemental cards, 2 big changeling cards in here. What's the new one called? Let me find it.
While Chris is finding that one, the elemental cards, one of the new elemental cards that I'm most excited about in this deck is Jubilation, which is a 3 and 5 elemental in incarnation 5/5. It has Encore 2 green and 7, but its ability is when this creature enters, creatures you control get +2/+2 and gain trample to end of turn. So it's like a mini Crater Hoof Behemoth.
Not even mini. Kratos +3, like +2 is no skin off that. It's basically a crater hoof with upside that you can do it again. Which is
And how much does I'm just going to check this live now. How much does Kratos Behemoth cost in terms of mana?
A fortune. I'm sure Jubilation. I don't know what it is in terms of mana. Couldn't tell.
Yeah, I want to see what it is in terms of mana. So, it is. Yeah, it's an 8 mana card, and that Jubilation is a 6 mana card.
6? God, even better.
And Kratos Behemoth is a slightly weaker version because Kratos Behemoth has haste, whereas Jubilation doesn't. And Kratos Behemoth gives trample and +X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. But I personally like the idea of Jubilation giving the +2/+2, so it's a fixed amount, so you don't have to worry about having a ton of creatures on before you play Kratos Behemoth.
This isn't a deck that has a ton of creatures on the board, because you're constantly evoking and sacrificing creatures.
Yes, exactly.
Why is there a very powerful overrun effect in a deck that doesn't have the ability to overrun? Like, okay, Springleaf Parade. This is an enchantment that's in this deck. X green. When this enchantment enters, create X 1/1 colorless shapeling creature tokens with Changeling. Creature tokens you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color. That's amazing. That is an amazing card in any number of decks.
I already have a couple of homes for it.
Oh, I have many homes for this. I have a Changeling deck. It's perfect in that. But there's many homes for this card because it basically says make a bunch of mana dogs. Great. They're Changelings, so they're all elementals. They're not evoked. They can't be evoked. They're 1/1s. There are quite a few cards in the deck scattered through it that say things like, if you control an elemental, do X, do Y. And like, there's reasons to do that, and I can see that. But why are you making a ton of small 1/1s in a deck that's about evoking big things? Like, it's not that it quote unquote doesn't belong there. It's that it feels like there's a very muddled sense of what this deck is trying to do. Like, let's talk about the land base, Josh. Holy hell.
No, sorry. I'd like to rephrase that. It's not called the land base. It's called the tap land base.
Yes.
The amount of tapped lands that are in here is ridiculous. I'm just going to quickly give you a count of how many there are. So these are cards that come in tapped no matter what.
Yeah.
1. So we've got Thriving Maw. Actually, I won't name all of them. I'll just count them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, so there are 12 out of the 40 lands that are in the deck that come in tapped no matter what. Then there are a further 1, 2. Actually, that one is tapped. 2.
So nearly half the land base. Nearly half the land base.
Nearly half, basically nearly half the mana base enters tapped, either no matter what, or they have to meet certain conditions to enter untapped, and that is ridiculous.
It's okay. I know that, and it's worth having a conversation about land bases here because I think it's relevant. Lands, if you're not just playing basics, which I think that the long and short of this conversation is playing more basics, but
16 of these lands, 16 of these 40 lands are basic. 8
good.
Of them are forest.
Yeah, which is also the whole design of it. Just, what are they doing? Anyway, we'll get back to that. Land bases can be super expensive. Of course they can be. And of course, if you're building a precon, you have a certain, don't go over this amount of reprint value cut off. I get it. They can't just reprint Tundra. That's going to happen. But there's nothing wrong with playing basics. You may not get all the colors that you need, but you can balance that based on the colors that you do need. For example, I would play more mountains than any other basic in this deck, because you need 1 mountain to get Ashling out, and that's quite important. And you need it by turn 3 to get Ashling out. Ergo, it's 5 colors, play more mountains. Easy start. They've put 8 forests in because they've put a ton of ramp in to go and find basics, and all ramp basically requires green mana. you can see the thought process that went into that. But if you don't draw ramp in the opening hand, you are looking at a hand full of tapped mana and probably elementals that cost about 7 or 8 mana, and you're going, guess I'm doing shit all this game. Can I have a third mulligan, please? Like this, it's just never going to happen. It's such bad design. And they've gone for some lands here that are not bad. They're just not right for a deck like this, which is, in essence, a red deck that needs to start off quickly and only requires 1 red mana pipped and 4 and 3 of any color, it genuinely doesn't matter, untapped, to get the ball rolling. That's what this deck requires, because that means you can cast Ashling and then you can evoke something. Or if you want to play it conservatively, you cast Ashling, holding up removal, and then evoke something. Like, who knows? Yeah. Point is that you need... This is a deck that requires speed, otherwise it will flounder. And this land base, nothing about it is quick. Let's just talk about some of the lands in here, because, yeah, as Josh said, there's 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 basics. I would put more basics in. I'm going to start there. Nothing wrong with basics.
My personal preference whenever it comes to any 5-color deck, regardless of whether the commander is 5 colors to cast or whether I have a Kenrith deck. Kenrith costs white and 4, so I realistically want more white than anything. My basic lands, I always have 6 of each, no matter what. Then if the commander like Kenrith or Ashling requires me to have more of a specific color, when it comes to the dual colored lands, then I'll focus more on that additional one.
There are
2 lands in here. Sorry, there are 2 lands in here that I would usually take out of a deck. Of my decks. They're not bad lands, but they focus more. So what they are Secluded Courtyard and Unclaimed Territory. Both of these say, as this land enters, choose a creature type. The land taps for colorless, or in Unclaimed Territory's instance, you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color, spend this mana only to cast a creature spell of the chosen type. Secluded Courtyard does the same thing, but it also allows you to activate an ability of a creature of the chosen type as well. Now, I would usually take those out of my decks, especially my 5-color decks, because I'm wanting to get my colors of mana, and having too many things that generate me generic mana doesn't work. But in this deck, because 1, it's elementals, and 2, Ashling has that evoke cost ability, and some of the other creatures have evoke costs on their own as well. I think these 2 are perfect cards in this deck, in my personal opinion.
There's nothing wrong with them. You're basically because evoke's not an activated ability; it's an alternative casting cost. So you're still casting elemental creatures, so the creature thing works. There's an ancient Ziggurat in here, which is great reprint because it's an old land and it's an expensive land. Add 1 mana of any color, spend this mana only to cast a creature spell. That's what you're doing in this deck.
I would take that out.
Why? Because it's only for creatures?
It's only for creatures. Yeah, that means if that's one of the only lands that I've got.
But so Secluded Courtyard. It's add generic mana, add 1 mana of any color, but spend it only to cast creatures.
But you still get that generic mana.
I suppose you still get the generic.
You still get the generic. That's the only reason I would keep them in there, is because you still get that generic mana to use to cast other things.
Okay, I concede to that point. These are not this is dealing with nitty gritty. But for example, they've put in all of the thriving lands: the thriving Grove, Heath, Isle, Bluff, and more. These are terrible. They're just bad. They enter tapped. They always enter tapped. In other words, you lose. You can't cast a spell worth 2 mana on turn 2 because you don't cast it. You can't cast. You lose that turn's ability to cast a spell of 1 extra mana than you had before, which is what tapping means. Where things entering tap means is you lose the ability to tap that mana for that turn. And because the game's gotten shorter, and the game has gotten shorter, undeniably so, that means that for 1 turn you're missing out on the 1 extra mana, and that can be enough to lose you the game. I think tap lands are awful. This one is particularly bad. It's a tap land. When it enters, you choose a color other than the color of Heath being plains, I think. Yeah, Heath being plains, for example. And you can also add a mana. You can instead of add white mana or a mana of the color that you chose. So it's fixing, but it's fixing on a tapped land, like an Evolving Wilds or a Terramorphic Expanse or Vibrant Cityscape is the new Spider-Man one. They're all the same thing. Enters tapped, sack it, go find a land.
I would also like to point out that none of those are in this deck.
I wouldn't play them in this deck either, because you want speed. These cards are not fast. If you are in a 3-color deck where you need to have all the right colors by turn 4, let's say, and you can afford to play it on turn 1, that's great. Pop it in the deck. But if you draw it on turn 5 when you need that color and instead you're tapping it and hoping and tapping it and you have to wait another turn, that is killer. Unless your deck requires your colors of mana to be perfect relatively early on, you don't need them. And frankly, playing a tap land is a big downside. You shouldn't do it.
See, my argument to that would be that in this particular deck, you want that red source to be able to get Aisling out. And it's not as if Aisling herself is a 5-color commander. So you don't need to sort of ramp up to get to those 5 colors straight away.
Replace it with a mountain. If you replace that Evolving Wilds with a mountain, statistically, you are more likely to draw the mountain.
Well, what happens if you get it at a point? What happens if you get the Evolving Wilds at a point when you need a different coloured land? So my thing is I always run Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse in my decks. In terms of tapped lands, if I'm running a 2-color deck, though, I'm likely to put those Thriving cards in. The other cards that are in this deck, which they enter tap, but they tap for 3 mana. In a 5-color deck, I will generally run 1, maybe 2 of these, and then I will run Path of Ancestry as well.
They are all...
So it's minimum of 2, maximum of 3 tap lands I'll run in a deck.
I genuinely think they are all absolute killer and that you shouldn't run any of them. Like, I know that this is a question of how purist do you want to go, but for my money, there are so many dual lands that you can get that tap for one or t'other. There are colorless lands that allow you to get 1 colored mana out of them. I've got a list of them here because I play them. Crumbling Vestige, Cascading Cataracts, Crystal Quarry, Holdout Settlement, Mirex, Survivor's Encampment, Tendo Icebridge. They all work basically the same way. When they enter, you can normally either get a mana of any color or you can tap them for a mana of any color, and then after that they're generic. Or some version of that event, basically. They are a way of making sure you can get 1 color once and then they're a generic one. In this deck, that's perfect. Because in this deck, you need the red mana, I've got it. And now it's a generic land. Oh no, my evoke costs. Like, it doesn't make a difference. And also in this deck, if you are getting to a point where you have, like, I'm going to play the big elementals for their actual cost, although I don't really know why you do that. You've got this, like, 6 and a green. Well, this can be one of the 6. It doesn't matter. Like, that's okay. I genuinely think you don't need tap lands. Like, I can tell you, there is a deck where I play all of these 3-color tap lands: the Savage Lands, Opulent Palace, Seaside Citadel, etc. There are 5 of them, 1 for each shard, isn't it? Is it 1 for each shard? Yes, it's 1 for each shard because they're from. No, it's 1 for each. Oh, I can't remember if they're shards.
No, because you get some in Tarkia as well. They're in the Tarkia colours as well.
They're not in the Tarkia colours. Oh, some of them are in the Tarkia colours. Yeah. I don't know. Shards and wedges confuse me. There are 5, and there's 1. They all tap for 3 colours of mana. I have a deck where I run all of them, but it's Omnath because everything in Omnath costs 3 mana or more because that's what triggers Omnath when Omnath is on the board. So what does it matter if on turn 1 or 2 I'm playing a tap land? It means I then have the mana to cast Omnath on turn 3 or 4, depending on if I've rammed. Like, there is no reason to play tap lands unless you're in a deck where you have shit all to do on turns 1 and 2. And this deck currently...
This deck doesn't.
But it needs it. It's a red deck. It's fast. And it's designed to be fast. You play your commander, you evoke a big elemental, everyone's taking damage because you're evoking this big thing, or you're drawing a ton of cards. You're ahead now, but you have to keep that aggro energy going. And it's so hard in this deck to keep that whole concept of it going, because you're there going, oh, well, actually, I'm playing a tap land, and I can't evoke again because I've run out of mana, because I had to play a protection spell on Aisling and a bastard. You just sat there with this handful of big things going, I can't do shit. And it doesn't make sense to me. Like, let's talk about duels, because I know there's this big thing about dual lands are so expensive. Some of them are, but not all of them. Some of them are very affordable. I've made a list of all the different land types here so we can talk about them. Like, True duels are ridiculous. They're from Alpha. They're Tundra, Scrublands, etc. They cost an absolute fortune. You can tap them for either. Good luck finding one for under $100. Fetch lands, similarly, don't actually tap for mana. You play them, you crack them, and you go and find a forest or plains, for example, one of two color types. These are also really expensive because they don't search up basics. They search up cards of which, like forest land, and guess what, the really broken lands that are super expensive and or game changers tend to be forest lands or whatever. So I'm saying forest because Gaia's Cradle is the obvious one here. I don't know, it's just me, but yeah, like there's a reason fetch lands are super expensive. You don't need them, like unless you're doing something stupid like that, you can stop. Same with the panoramas, same business, and the panoramas also cost a mana to do it, so not worth it. Don't do it, don't waste your time. Tap lands enter tapped, you don't need those. Shock lands, you can pay 2 life and they enter untapped. Again, these are super expensive, you do not need them. Battle lands, Tango lands sometimes, enter untapped, you control 2 or more basic lands of any type. These tend to be cheap because people go like, well, no one plays basics. If you play more basics, these become better because you're more likely to be able to cast them, to use them and have them tap immediately.
I wouldn't run them in 5-color decks. I don't run them in 5-color decks.
I do run them in 5-color decks because your chance of having tons of... Because, I mean, I tend to run more basics in 5-color decks than anything else because there's no reason not to. And if you don't quite end up with the exact mana that you need, depending on the deck, that's bad. In this deck, it probably makes sense not to run them because of the red thing. But yes, they're perfectly fine. Bond lands are very expensive. They're the ones that enter untapped. You have 2 or more opponents, and they're becoming more popular. But those are quite expensive now. Sorry, go on.
I don't run those either. I also don't run the lands that say the dual lands that say this enters tapped if you control less than 2 lands or whatever it is. I don't run those either. The lands that I do run in my 5-color decks are the ones that say this card enters tapped unless you control 2 other lands. So any other lands, I run those ones in 5-color.
How about pain lands? They're the ones that tap for generic or 1 damage to use.
Oh, I love them. Yes.
Yeah, they're great.
Yes, love them.
And they would be great in this deck. Where the hell are they?
Yeah.
Because generic's fine in this deck. You're fine with them tapping for generic. That's kind of the point. There's also pain tap lands. Be very careful of those. Scry lands enter tapped. Gain lands enter tapped. Reveal lands are very difficult to play in multicolored decks because the chance you'll be able to reveal a land of the right color from your hand so they enter untapped is almost nil.
I hate reveal lands. There's 2 reveal lands in this deck where they say reveal an elemental card. Otherwise it enters tapped. I don't want my opponents to know what is in my hand unless they cast a spell to look at my hand. Even if it's just a land I'm showing them, I don't want them to have that knowledge.
Yeah, like Flamekin Village looks good on paper, then you think about it and go, hey, so I'm going to play this land so I can play it untapped because I reveal this fuck off massive elemental and I cast my commander. Opposing player, concerning. Like, yes, it doesn't work. Conceptually, it's bad. Now, you and I disagree about filter lands. I think filter lands are great and you hate them.
Which ones? Oh, yes, they're the ones that...
Put in 1 color and then you can get... Basically, you can tap them for generic or you put in 1 of a color and you can use it to filter colors.
The only thing that's good about those is that they don't enter tapped. Everything else about them for me is bad because they hurt my brain, and I don't want my land base to hurt my brain.
That is entirely fair. It depends on how much brain power you want to put towards your land base, which is totally understandable.
And I don't want that. I want my land. I want my brain power to go into my cards. Although to be fair, if I'm just playing big stompy elementals, I might put a more complicated land base in there.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of strike 1 for me against this deck's land base is that there are ways to build a land base for it that are inexpensive that would make it better as a 5-color deck. The chance of getting all 5 colors, of playing them, of getting to your commander faster would be easier. I also find it particularly insulting that they've gone, we'll pop in 8 forests and that means it'll ramp better. The ramp pieces they are offering you for 8 forests are Abundant Growth, great choice. You enchant a land and it taps for any color, but you also get to draw a card off it. That is a bigger boon than you think, because it means if you have a forest in your hand and this card, you can play it on turn 1, tap it to make the forest make the forest an any color land, and you draw a card that replaces itself. That's not bad. Compare that to Fertile Ground, which means that it's a 1 and a green. Whenever enchanted land is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional 1 mana of any color. That means you've suddenly got a land that taps for 2 mana, and it taps for the color it has plus another one, but it costs 2 mana, it doesn't replace itself. In a deck where you, I'm going to say it, in a deck where you're hoping to cast a creature spell every turn, card draw is important, and wasting cards on ramp that don't also draw you cards or don't refill your hand is a problem. Like, even cultivating the Kadama's Reach, which are in here, I'm sort of okay. Like, it's fine to have some ramp in there, and it lets you go find basics to find the colors that you need. And they are both 3 mana, which is when you want to be casting Ashlings. So why isn't the 1 and a green, which is called Rampant Growth? Is that right?
Rampant Growth and the new Avatar one, Shared Roots. Why
aren't they in there? Like, those are the right colors to go, now I can cast Ashling next turn, not 3 mana. Guess I'm waiting. Like, why is it in there? Anyway, and then they've got a whole bunch of creatures that cost 2 or 3 green mana pips, because the assumption is that you will have more green mana because that's the color they've packed out the land base with. And one of them is Selvala. And Selvala's an amazing ramp card.
An amazing ramp card, I think, is an instant removal in this deck.
It's 1 and a green, 1 and 2 green, Legendary Elf Scout. Whenever another creature enters, its controller may draw a card if its power is greater than each other creature's power, and for green and tap, add X mana in any combination of colors, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. If you get her on the board and you start evoking elementals, you can tap her using more of that green mana they've filled this deck out with to give yourself a metric shit ton of mana to keep evoking more elementals. It's a really cool choice for the deck, but it's 2 green mana pips when arguably green shouldn't be the thing you're focusing on. And it's a 5 to 6. How much? Selvala costs a fortune, right? It's £5-10.
Something like that, yeah. Last time I looked, because I looked at getting one for my elf deck, she was like 12 quid.
It's a really valuable reprint in a deck that, yes, it can use the ability really, really well, but it's not an elemental. It can't be evoked. You have to cast it for its full cost, which is prohibitive because you need 2 green mana. Where are you going to get that from? Like, would you prioritize getting more green mana so you could cast this over casting Ashlings? No, it doesn't work. It's just weird. It's a weird choice.
There are other cards in this deck that have a similar effect to Selvala that work better with the deck. One of them, where is he gone, is one of my favourite 5-colour cards, although it's not a 5-colour card in terms of its casting value, is Jagana the Wellspring. Jagantha the Wellspring, because taps for 5 colors. So guess what? And it's an elemental elk. So you evoke this thing out for 4. You don't do anything with it. So you sacrifice it and all that sort of stuff. Get rid of it. End of turn, you can tap it to keep it around.
You wouldn't do that though. There's no reason. No,
but you could.
Josh, Jagantha. You've got Jagantha in your hand. You have Ashling out on the board. You spend 4 mana out of your mana base to play Jagantha. When it's played, you tap it before it dies to float 5 Wooburg, to float Wooburg in colors that can only be spent to cast, that can't be spent to pay generic mana costs. Yeah. So you can't use it on Ashling's ability.
You can't use it on her evoke ability, but you can use it on her ability to keep the token around.
It's that thing. You then make a copy of Jagantha that's on the board, which you tap for Wooburg that can only be spent on Wooburg colors. Now, are you going to have 2 white, 2 blue, 2 green, 2 black, 2 red to cast on something? Probably not. But you can keep the copy, and you still got 5 mana to spend on anything you have that has those 5 colors of mana, like, say, a Horde of Notions that you've got lying around and this deck has, or the backup commander that you've got lying around this deck has. It's so good in this deck, and it's the perfect fit for it, and it's such a cool way of using Jagantha, which is usually a companion that gets used in high-powered CEDH stuff. Like, it's such a cool idea. And yet, there's also Selvala there, and you're like, you could replace that with a 1 blue mana, give the target creature hexproof till end of turn. And you'd be fine. It would be a much better deck with that 1 piece of protection in it. I'm repeating myself. Anyway, the point is, there's a lot of stuff in this deck that I would consider putting elsewhere. And frankly, there's a lot of stuff in this deck that I would, if you wanted to keep it together and run it as a deck, I would do, but keep it slightly differently. Let's talk about things we'd add, like positives.
Yes. So one card that I would 100% add When I look at the number of cards that are in this deck, you've got 36 creatures, 40 lands. There are 7 sorceries, 7 enchantments, 5 instants, and 5 artifacts. And then there are 2 Kindred cards. So that means there are 8 enchantments and 37 creatures. Because Kindred is listed separately. My feeling towards this would be I'm a 38 land person, so I would take 2 lands out. And I would probably lower the creature amount down to either 30. It would either be 28, 30, because I have to work in evens. It would either be 28, 30, or 32.
Yeah.
And I would use the space that I've made to put stuff into not so much the artifact section, but more into the instants and sorcery sections to add those pieces of protection. As well as replacing things. But one of the enchantments that I would add, so I would take Hoofprints of the Stag out, which is a green and 1, Kindred enchantment elemental. Whenever you draw a card, you may put white and 1. Whenever you draw a card, you may put a Hoofprint counter on this enchantment. For a white and 2, remove 4 Hoofprint counters to create a elemental token with flying. I would remove that for Reflections of Litjara, which is a blue and 4 enchantment. And as this enchantment enters, choose a creature type, elemental. Whenever you cast a spell of the chosen type, copy that spell. Now, we did a little bit of research before we did this recording. Because this is on the cast, if you use, and we got this information from Reddit, so if anybody has any official, if anybody knows any different, please do let us know below. But from the research that we've done, when you cast the spell, which is what Reflections of the Jared does, you cast it with the evoke cost of Ashling. The copy that you would create through this enchantment comes in as if it's been cast with an evoke cost as well. So when both hit the ground, they both get sacrificed. You'll only make the token copy from the original card and not the token that you've made with the Reflections, but you still get enters triggers and leaves triggers from both cards if there is any on the elemental, which there are. Most of the elementals have got ETB or leave triggers, so
because that's why they've got evoke, because the whole point is they evoke because they have enters and leaves triggers to make them work spells too. Yeah, it's very cool. And it means that all of those cool effects just get doubled up even further. Like we worked out, what's your most basic elemental? A Muldrifter, the one that everyone talks about. Muldrifter, when it enters, you draw 2 cards. So if Ashling's on the field, you can cast the Muldrifter for 3, it draws you 2 cards. You then sacrifice the Muldrifter because you evoked it, and then the copy comes in and draws you 2 cards. And if you have Reflections of the Yara out, you get another copy that also sacrifices itself immediately, and Ashling doesn't make non-token copies, so you can't do it again. You'd still draw 6 cards for 3 cost. Hard to argue with. I mean, by that definition, more copy cards feels like another direction to push this in. I'm not going to specific cards to highlight here because there are so many, but any creature that says when it enters, it becomes a copy of target creature. If you become a target of the if you become a copy of the elemental token, you will sacrifice that creature at the end of turn, but you'll still get all of the enters effects. If you have instants and sorceries, you can cast on the evoked one, especially if it's an instant casting like the evoke one before it sacrifices itself to make more copies of it. You're just increasing what the deck is already doing in terms of giving output, which is a good way to add value to the deck. It's not a good way to win, but it's a good way to add value to the deck.
Another great card that works really well with Reflections of Litjara as well, which is in the Precon, is Omnath, Locusts of Royal, just for its first ability. Whenever Omnath enters, it deals damage to any target equal to the number of elementals you control. So if you're doing that and making technically 3 copies of Omnath, dies to legendary rule anyway, and will die, and 2 of the copies will die anyway. The original and the copy you make from Reflections will die anyway, but that's still like 3 separate sets of damage that you can do to any target on the board. So it's a good way for you to remove a threat on the board or deal damage to someone's face.
Also, we talked about Jubilation. Like, Jubilation is one of the new elemental cards that if if you have the enter with all of these copy effects out, the pluses all your creatures get, and the plus of the version of Jubilation that will have haste and be able to attack this turn gets plus trample is insane.
Yeah.
And there's encore effects on them too that you'll really struggle to do with the right number of pips because of the way the deck's built. But if you find ways to get those pips to a point where you can actually cast out in that way, you could very easily be doing a ton of combat damage overrunning. They've also put in Yarok, who is also an elemental.
Yarok, yes.
If a permanent entering causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time.
Yes.
Which means all the evoke triggers happen twice, so 4 times. It means if you happen to keep a copy around, if you make all these copies, there is an obvious way to do this deck, which is copies upon copies upon copies upon copies, which they'll all sacrifice, but who gives a shit? You've got all the triggers off them.
Panharmonicon.
You could use a Panharmonicon and similar effects.
Yeah.
Just copy and copy and copy. Yeah. And again, they didn't do that. They just made a deck and said, look at all the elementals we've made, and moved on with their lives. I was going to be more positive. There's some changelings that work quite well in this deck that aren't just random. I make some changelings that don't really synergize with the deck. I was going to be more positive. It's not working. Let me just get them up.
You negative ninny.
It irritates me when the company that makes the game appears to have missed the point of what they're doing.
It's like they've just given you the basic shell of a deck and gone, now spend money on more product.
I mean, that's the classic conspiracy theory is that they build the deck and put in some duff cards in the hopes that you'll upgrade it. I can see why they would do that, but this is more than just some duff cards, hopefully you'll upgrade it. This is you play it once and go, I hate this game, I'm never playing it again. Because let's consider, most precons are bought by people who aren't me or Josh or you watching this video. They don't engage in content because a vast number of people who play Magic don't engage in content and don't buy singles. They just buy precons and play them as a board game with their friends. That is, I think it's 90% of all players last time Woods has checked. It's a huge number of people. They're going to buy the precon, play it with their mates and go, that sucked. I'm not playing Magic anymore. That cannot be the right way to do this. Anyway, a Bloodline Pretender costs 3 generic mana. It's an artifact, shapeshifter, changeling. As it enters, choose a creature type. Whenever another creature of the chosen type enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on Bloodline Pretender. Yep. Welcome to the biggest changeling on your board, because every time you evoke, you get 2 counters on it, and you just have this gigantic thing that won't have any of the effects. But if you then have the give things trample and so on, it's just great. It just sits there doing a good job.
I think one of the things that you do, I think another one that the whole thing with Lorwyn is there are unique creature types in Lorwyn. You've got the Kithin, you've got elementals, you've got giants, you've got all of this stuff that's getting support in Lorwyn Eclipsed. I said to Chris when I first saw the cover art for this precon, I hope that is a changeling precon, is what I said to Chris. And Chris was like, I don't think it's going to be. Yes, there are some changelings in here. However,
that's clearly Ashley.
However, I seriously do think that this could be take a lot of the elemental creatures out, the more useless ones. Like, for example, I would take out Maelstrom Wanderer, because yes, you get the cascade triggers, the 2 cascade triggers when you evoke it.
Yeah.
You evoke it for 4, but you get to cascade twice for 8. That is good. But I would potentially take that out to add something like Taurian Mauler in, which is, I think, is a red and 2, and whenever a spell's cast, it gets a 1/1 counter. That's really good.
Just a nice thing to have sat in the background,
because nice you don't want every single creature in your deck to sit there and be like, I must cast this thing for the evoke cost so that I can get Ashlyn's trigger, because you do want creatures to stick on the board. So having changeling creatures that also count as elementals for your other cards that say elemental creatures do this, that, or the other, or like Omnath, Locus of the Royal, I think having the low-cost changelings in here, swapping some of the bigger elementals out that don't really work with the deck, is much better than sticking with all the big high cost mana value things. So I think this is a good changeling thing, which is probably what I might do with it. I was working on a 5-color changing deck, but that 5-color changing deck might change to this now. I don't know. I haven't decided yet.
I mean, I think there's more interesting things to do with changings. That's an aside. I have a couple of different versions of ways to talk about this. I'm going to start. Okay, hear me out on this first. Watsy's propensity towards 5-color design has been criticized in the past and has recently started being criticized more so for whack all 5 colors on a commander, let it work typally with a certain type of thing, throw all the cards in there, it'll be grand. And you end up with these soupy 5-color, everything's a spider, Cosmic Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Everything's an assassin up to here. Everything's a Teenage Mutant Ninja or Turtles for the next one coming out.
Yeah. I'm so looking forward to that, but that's another video.
Don't get me wrong, Turtles I'm okay on because I think there's something there, but we'll get back to that when we get to the actual set.
Yeah.
There is an argument
or they're an ally in Avatar.
Oh, yeah. Allies in Avatar, sure. Allies were always 5-color, different story. 5-color soup, which has recently started being called 5-color slot because everyone likes the word slot because it got used last year to talk about all commander cards. It was the word of the year in a bunch of dictionaries, and thanks AI, piece of shit. Like, look, there is a reason we use words like soup and slot to talk about these 5-color messes because they are messes. Like, you can do so much with this, but you are taking elementals. Let's give them all evoke. Most of them do already. Okay, let's give them a cheaper evoke cost. Cool. And then let's give them a 5-color cost that we're never going to use. Why? It feels a bit like it's 5 colors just for the sheer nature that means they can throw all the elementals in. Also, there's a ton of new elementals in Eclipsed. And they're great. There's some really good new... None of them are in here. They said they made 5 new ones that sort of don't really work with it. And yet there's a whole bunch of other ones that, depending on what colors of mana you use to cast them, you get bonus effects so that you have a reason not to evoke them. So you can use Ashling's ability or you can have them on the board and there's good reason to do it because the pips mean something. And they're just not in the deck. And it's crazy that they're not in the deck. And I know that the team that makes Standard, the team that make Commander are not the same team, and for some reason they don't even talk to each other, and it's really weird that these things aren't made more in tandem. I blame the fact that Watsy still thinks Commander is somewhat beneath them, even though it makes them all the money. Because the designers are old. I mean, it's a long-standing rant about the way that Watsy handles their business. But what we've ended up because of that is there's lots of great elementals in the main set, they're not here. You could probably buy all of them, put them in the set and make it better. That's just a given. I think if you were going to build this and say, I like 5-color elementals, look at Lorwyn Eclisped. Oh my god, there's so many. Put them all in, and you'll have a great time. Why not? Seems a sensible thing to do. I would also say that you are not bound to this 5-color melange where you can just put in generically good cards and it will generically make the deck better. Which I know is part of the reason that 5-color suit commanders exist, because you can play them, put in all of your spiders or whatever, and then go, and here's Lightning Greaves. Bam, I made the deck better. Of course you did. It's a generically good card, and you can play it in any deck, so it doesn't matter. You don't need to do that in this deck. You can be more intelligent. Because this deck really only requires red mana. Ashling requires a single red pip, everything else is generic, unless you want to keep the elemental tokens that you spent 4 to put on the board, and now have 5 Wooburg to keep. Oh yeah, that's going to happen. I reckon that happens once in a game every 10 games you play the deck, when you get to super high levels and you have Wooburg sitting around. They do somewhat mitigate that this might be a problem by putting Timeless Lotus and Gigantha in, because these are both cards that generate Wooburg, and they have to be used to cut, and the Giganthus has to be used to spend Wooburg. So it's almost like it's there to make you keep the elemental, although I wouldn't bother. But you have the ability to do that. Keep those cards in. Why not? But why not make the deck... Let's start with the thought process. Mono red. Mm-hmm. There are plenty of red elementals. There are lots of good red elementals, which means you could still keep triggering Ashling's ability to evoke big elementals. There are lots of big red elementals. You could easily make this happen. You would hit the evoke thing less frequently, which would make it less exciting to do the evoke thing. You'd only do it like once every other turn, once every 3 turns or something. But red is very, very good at making mana and making lots of it by using treasures and by using rituals. Jeska's Will is a ritual. You get a red, no, it's a game changer. You get red mana equal to some ridiculously easy thing, and you get a ton of red mana. Inner Fire is a red ritual that lets you get red, I think red for every card in your hand. Like, there are many ways in red to get a ton of mana very quickly to have a turn where you evoke 4 elementals. That would be very possible, I think. There's a red elemental called I think it's a Runaway Steamkin.
Yes, Runaway Steamkin's a good one, yeah. I would like to say as well that if you search up just put into Google list of elementals Magic the Gathering and then click on the Gatherer website.
Use Scryfall.
I do it. I do it this way because it's an easier way for me to search. But yeah, if you then click on the advanced search and click on the different colors, it tells you how many of the elementals there are. Although it does break it down between paper magic and arena magic. But red. So just to quickly go over this, elementals in red there are 200.
Yeah.
Elementals in green there are 134. Elementals in black there are 33.
Yeah.
In blue, there are 103.
Yeah.
And in white, there are 28. Now that doesn't include the mix of color combos, but I'm not gonna go through every single color combination that there is. There are 2 colorless ones.
This is where Scryfall would be better. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is that there are plenty of elementals. The red ones that are in there are from previous Lorwyn Shadowmoor blocks. They're all quite small because they're actually elemental creatures, and it's more about having, like, it's a tribal thing, which you don't need. And you I think making it mono red is a mistake because it would be too generic, and you'd end up just you could play a lot of like impulsive pilferers and things to give yourself lots and lots of treasure, so you'd have the ability to do these blast turns where you cast a billion big elementals. That'd be very cool. But for my money, the only other color we've talked about in this entire setup that you need in the deck to make it work, that really makes it sing, is black. Because it means that you can recur Aisling if she dies. You can recur all the elementals that you're shucking into your graveyard. You could put in a Rise of the Dark Realms, which is an expensive card, but there are versions of Rise of the Dark Realms, like Night of the Dead. What's it called? Night of the cards that say return all creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. There are quite a few.
Yeah.
And all of the ones that do that, hey presto, in this deck where you're chucking elementals into your graveyard left, right, and center, suddenly they're all back. Like, that's very cool. It also means that whenever you are, like, if you can do the trick of evoking the elemental, playing the thing that when it dies it comes back, and then you have 2 copies of it and you can attack with one of them and the other stays on the board for value. Like, that's where I ended up. Red-black is not the most obvious elemental deck, but I would almost take this deck and go, cool, all of this green, all of this blue, all of this white, that's nice, but you're not really working towards the strategy of the deck at all. You are just there because you have the word elemental printed on you. And we can do better. Let's do red, let's do black. Black also does rituals, like Dark Ritual's a famous black card that spends 1, you get 3. Like, there's loads like this. And you could very easily build this very cool Rakdos red-black deck that's technically 5 color. So you could keep some 5 color cards in there if you wanted to. Like, I'd keep the backup commander in there because if Gigantha's in there, no reason for Gigantha not to be in there. Oh, there's 5 color Massive Mysteries and the 5 color Horde of Notions. If you keep the Timeless Lotus and Gigantha in as well, you can evoke them. You can still evoke them for 4 generic mana. It doesn't matter because the commander's still 5 colors. Everything in the deck is red and black. And then if you've evoked them, you get them. You can use their 5 color abilities to recur things or to bring things back. It's like a little bomb hidden in your deck that you can do this 5 color thing, but you very rarely do because it doesn't come up very often. Instead, you're basically evoking massive elementals and recurring them from the graveyard as often as you can. I think that's what I'd do with it. I would just tear it apart. And partially I'm doing it because of a fit of pique, because 5 color soup can get in the bin, but also because if it's a 5 color commander, it has to have a reason why it's 5 colors. If it costs 5 colors to cast that spell, you need all 5 colors. Ergo, you will get something out of playing all 5 colors. It is the easiest way to make this effect work. But if its casting cost is not 5 colors, there's an activated ability that you sort of fancy but don't need. Why do it to yourself? Why
It's
put
like
yourself through the ring roll?
my Kenrith deck could technically. I mean, I do have blue cards in there, but I could take all of the blue cards out and run it as a 4-color deck because most of the cards that are in there are the other colors other than blue because I'm not a big fan of blue. But and because he's just a white and 4, and his activated abilities are of each color, so he doesn't really need it. For my money, I would look to make this deck into, if I didn't want to do a 5-color deck, I would probably make it a Mardu deck because I like Mardu, and I would make it an aristocrat style deck.
Yeah.
You know, you focus on those sacrifice triggers. You put a couple of cards in there, like Talia Karlov, who doubles death triggers and all of that sort of stuff. Pitiless Plunderer to get yourself treasure tokens, and I mean, you're making tokens, so I'd add a Mirkwood Bats in here because the token enters and then dies.
I wouldn't put this card in a 5-color deck because it has a black pip and a red pip. Therefore, it's quite hard to cast in a deck where you might not get the right pips. But if I was playing this as either a Rakdos or a Mardu deck, the Master Multiplied would let you keep all of the tokens that you would sacrifice.
And
because the Master says you can't sacrifice. Don't sacrifice the things that get put on the field. You're effectively saving yourself Wooburg every turn by playing the Master Multiplied.
That was going to be one of my other things, was going to be one of the Zergos from the Precon, the Target Precon I would add in here, the Mobilized one, because his effect is when tokens leave the battlefield.
When tokens leave the battlefield, everyone takes a damage.
Yeah.
Unless they're during combat, which they could do, and then you draw cards.
But then you draw a card. He would be brilliant in this deck.
But see, that's the thing that I don't understand. I guess it's not very thematic, but the deck they have built here is not a 5-color deck. The design is not a 5-color deck. The design tends towards certain colors doing certain things. So, yeah, I think that's probably the end. The sort of final note on this deck is that you don't have to play it as 5-color soup. And there are 5-color decks that force you into that sort of gameplay where you need to be finding like the synergy pieces within that. Like, for example, my 5-color Sagas deck, there are Sagas of every color, which means that therefore automatically you feel like, well, I can then play all the Sagas. That's very cool. And it is very cool. It also means that you can play all the cards in every color because they're not limited. They're across all colors that say historic permanence, Sagas of historic permanence, that say enchantments, that say everything that Sagas are. And there's so many things that Sagas are. Like my Tom Bombadil deck, I had a point where it was becoming very much a burn deck because every Saga burned people when it left. And I went, that's cool, and I like that as like an end step, but I prefer to just play more Sagas. So now, as Josh will attest, every time I play that deck, you cannot see my table.
It's like, what color is your table again?
Because you can't see it, because you're playing every Saga under the sun.
And it's like with I have a Jodo the Unifier deck.
Yes.
And the thing with that is legendary. Any things that are legendary are in that deck because Jodo triggers off of legendary things and is 5 colors. I also have a Jodo the Archmage Eternal deck, which is disgusting and horrible. It very much is. And that doesn't necessarily have a like subtype to it, like legendaries or like what Chris said with Tom Bombadil. Yeah. But you know, it's one of those things where the Archmage Eternal's 5-color comes from its effect rather than its colors, because it's Jeskai, it's red, white, blue, and 1. So yeah, there's so many different types of 5-color decks out there. You can run this as a 5-color deck if you want to, but I think that the commander is flexible enough for you to be able to run it in every way. And I mean, if you're running Command Tower, and if you do run Path to Ancestry, Exotic Orchard, or any of the creature and the artifact that we mentioned before, you still have access to the colors that you haven't actually put into the deck. So if you do want to use Ashling's ability, it's online for you. Chromatic Lantern's in the deck as well, so it fixes all of your lands.
Again, there's when a deck in a Precon comes with a Chromatic Lantern built in, you know something's gone wrong. That card is terrible. that card is the most like solid. We couldn't make the mana base work. Here's an artifact that means it doesn't matter anymore. It's 3 mana for a rock that says all lands can be add a mana of any color.
Yeah.
If your deck requires that to make it work, something's gone horribly wrong. It's not a good card.
Oh, I really like it, especially considering the fact that I run Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse. If I've got a Chromatic Lantern out and I place one of them out, I can tap it for a color, and then I can sacrifice it when I want to.
That's just, no.
That's fine.
Look, okay. It's very fair to say that when Josh and I talk about lands and talk about mana, I genuinely think that 9 times out of 10 is not a problem. Why are you killing yourself over it? And if your deck is killing you over it, then there's a problem with the deck design. For example, the 5-color Tom Bombadil deck is a great example of this because I don't run a lot of lands. I run the ones I was talking about that give you 1 color and then become generic, because sagas all tend to be 1 pip or maybe 2 pips and then generic mana costs. And I purposefully try and run sagas that are 1 pip, specifically because that I want to cast spells. Like, there are plenty of cool sagas with 2 pips. Try and avoid them as much as possible because that's just the nature of the deck. And I think if I played a lot of 2 color pip sagas and I couldn't cast them a lot, that would be a problem with the deck design. In the same way, my Omnath Locus of All, every time you tap anything, any mana on your turn, and you don't use it, Omnath stores that as black mana. I also gave myself the restriction on the deck that every card has to be 3 color pips, because he cares about 3 color pips. It cares about 3 color pips. Omnath cares about 3 color pips. What that tends to mean is that, because I've given myself that restriction, is that I want there to be 3 color pips on every card, so that every time I do Omnath's flip a card trick, he'll be on the screen. His effect is very complicated. Read it.
It's very cool.
It's very cool. I love it. But it means that every time you flip a card with 3 colors on it, which you flip after your draw step, then you get mana based on those 3 pips. And then all of your mana turns into black if you tap it, because he's a battery. He stores like Electro does, or Ozai does, who we've talked about before. Point is, I specifically went, cool, 3 colors, need it. Every deck needs to have 3 pips. They don't have to be 3 pips of different colors. That's not important. Every card has to have 3 pips. Which cards with 3 pips ramp? There's not many, and they're really fascinating, and I play all of them because it's interesting, because it means that I'm ramping for the colors I don't have. I play all of the I play tap lands that tap for 3 because I cannot play cards on turns 1 and 2. There are no cards in the deck that cost 1 or 2 mana. They simply don't exist. Yeah. So, ergo, it's fine to have tap lands for that. And also, the moment Omnath is down, I'm generating mana immediately off cards I flip off the top. So actually, having some slow mana in the deck is not a problem, and it means I'm more likely to have the mana I need. I also run the new Capenna creatures. There's a set of 5 of them. They're 5 creatures that you can exile them to turn a land into a 3-color tapper. They cost 2 to do. It's really bad rate of return, and yet in a deck where I'm casting nothing on turn 2 ever, it's great because I can exile that card instead and use it because they all have 3 pips, so it works. But all of that is to say that's all deck building to make a 5-color deck. Sorry, the point I was going to get to was that then almost all the 3-color cards in, I prioritize black mana because I'm always going to have black mana because Omnath makes black mana.
Yeah.
Like, if there's a Teamer card I like, I look at it and go, yeah, but what's the chance I have the right pips for it? Because that's the problem. You need to be thinking in that way about your 5-color decks. Every piece of construction a 5-color deck should be going toward its 5 colors. How am I going to make this work? Because it's 5 colors. And this deck doesn't do any of that. It ignores all of that principle of 5 colors. That means we can put anything in it.
And on that note, final notes for the deck.
I would turn it into Rakdos and have a whale of a time.
It needs some work. It can go in multiple directions. It needs some work. It can go in multiple directions. It's going to be a very hard... I personally feel it's going to be a very hard deck to play out of the box.
Almost impossible. You'd lose almost every time.
Yeah.
Would you play the backup over the face?
No.
No, me neither.
No, because Myriad is a cool ability, but as soon as you get down to 1-on-1, it's useless.
It's a 5-color commander that costs 1 of each color in a deck that doesn't do that very well, and that doesn't do its lesser version that should make it easier well either. It just compounds the problem.
The one 5-color card in this deck that I would play over the backup commander is the one that you mentioned before.
Horde of Notions. The original 5-color elemental commander.
Yeah, that would be the one that I would consider playing that one.
We're building a new elementals deck. We're going to make it 5 colors. We're going to add a ton of new cards in. Cool. What's the upshot? I think I might play the 5-color elemental that we had for 10 years, 12 years before that.
Yeah, I would honestly play that, because then it allows me to play my big things out of the graveyard if I evoke them using their own evoke costs, and then get them out. So yeah, Ashling's still a great commander. I still think Ashling's a great commander, but is stuck to the elemental types. You can't really do much else with her, unfortunately.
But that's the thing. Like as we've said, you can. If you made the deck more red, black, and potentially white focused, you could do a lot more with the fact that she's making token copies that die. You can do a lot more with. But
they still need to be elementals, is what I'm getting at. You can't. Yeah, but it doesn't say creature spells you cast from your hand have evoke for.
That's fine though. That's not a huge problem, because all of your big hitters make them elementals, and all of your little value pieces, well, you're not evoking them, but that's fine. They cost less than 4 mana. What does it matter?
Anyway, that's it for today's episode. We're going to go. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching. Catch us on Twitch for our D&D streams. We do other things on Patreon and YouTube. All of the links for everything will be down below. Massive thank you to our Patreons. There is a Magic Head tier that you can join if you'd like to get early access to these videos. Please do. We also have a new Legends tier, which if you like TTRPG content and Magic content, you can get all of it in that one place. There may also be an option in the future for you to be able to play some Magic the Gathering games, Commander games specifically, with either Chris and myself, both of us, one of us, depending on interest on it and how many people we can get together. So, and
Josh and I have a lot of children between us, not together, but so when we've got time, it's also very relevant.
On that note, we're going to go. Bye.